Listen, when it's summer, it is the season to read romance, and you might not see it coming, but the next romance that you read might be set in Canada. Today on the podcast, this moment in romance novels and how Canada got sexier. I'm Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud. This is Commotion. Okay, first of all, happy Canada Day to all of you listening. Listen, I want to spend some time today talking about books and specifically romance. If you've not been paying attention to romance books lately, you might have been surprised that Canadian author Carley Fortune's newest book debuted at #1 on the New York Times bestseller list. It's a book called This Summer Will Be Different. It is a romance set on Prince Edward Island. But if you have been paying attention, then you know that Carley has been consistent in giving romance readers the book of the summer for the last few years. Carley's books have been getting a lot of buzz, not just for the romance, not just for the sex scenes, but also specifically for how the books are set in Canada. New book in PEI, but also she said a book in a cottage country in Barry's Bay, Ontario. These are sensual, sexy books that are also set in some of Canada's most beloved locations. I wanted to get into all of this and talk about a relationship to romance books. The group chat is here. Kathleen Newman-Bremang is here. Alicia Foshay is here. Farah Heron is here. Kathleen, Alicia, and Farah, welcome to the show, everybody.
Hi, Elamin. My
Hello.
favorite topic. Thank you.
I know. Listen, I knew that you would be seated for this, Kathleen. I was like, Kathleen's going to be here. Listen, I'm going to start with you, actually, Kathleen. I'll start with you on this. I know from our conversations a bunch that, like, you ride for romance above all other genres. What made you pick up Carley's latest book?
Well, Carley and I actually used to work together at Refinery 29 Canada.
Oh, amazing.
We used to sit side by side at a WeWork. And, you know, one of the things now that I'm very proud of that she told me is that she started reading romance novels again and getting back into that world that she loved when she was younger, in part because we sat together. And I can't go like 5 seconds without talking about romance in some way, as Elamin knows.
That's 100% true. Every time you meet Kathleen, she's like, hey, can I talk to you about Taylor Hibbert? Every day. Yes.
So we talked about romance novels a lot. And so I got an early copy of her first novel every summer after. And I remember, putting it down after I read it for the first time and saying out loud, she's going to do this for the rest of her life. Yeah. She's very good. And, there's so much really great writing in the romance genre. I know that it gets a bad rap. There is so much really good writing, but there is also a lot of really bad writing. And I think when you have books like Carley's that are really good at world building, taking you to a cozy place, these Canadian places that are familiar to some of us. And then they all also really have strong male leads, and they are good dudes, not toxic dudes, which is also prevalent in this genre. Colleen Hoover, guys.
Ooh, she said it.
I said it.
What? We were 4 seconds into the conversation, like Colleen Hoover, toxic men.
Sorry.
Okay, yeah.
But I will just say, the reason why I picked up, to answer your question, the reason why I picked up Carley's latest book is because I think you've got all the ingredients for a great romance novel in all of her books. And when you find a great romance novel, you're going to find me. And so that's why I continue to read them.
100%. I appreciate the elements that you pointed out of the things that make Carley's books work. I think she's particularly good at writing the dialogue. There's a lot of romance books that are like, great premise, but God, that's not how regular people talk at all. Right. Carley doesn't do that. Like these characters feel real. These characters feel lived in, and you want to go hang out with them. Alicia, I want to ask you. So you review books all the time on Instagram and TikTok. Who turned you on to Carley Fortune's novels?
Honestly, which is surprising enough, it was my American followers. I had seen this book, this cover, because it has an American, Every Summer After, for those of you who don't know, is the only one of her books that has an American cover and a specifically Canadian cover. Yeah. So I had seen these two covers going around on Book Talk and Bookstagram. And at first I didn't actually realize they were the same book. And then I was like, well, I don't know if I'll pick it up because I don't like the Canadian cover. Okay. And it was the one that I would see in my Canadian
You're allowed to
bookstores.
say it. You don't have to apologize.
I said it. Yeah. Happy Canada Day. No, I didn't like that one as much as the other. Yeah. And I was hesitant to grab it because, like, let's call a spade. We all judge a book by its cover. You pick up the one that looks the nicest. Yeah. And And then I got flooded with American followers in my comments and DMs, not only saying like, have you read it? We need your review. What did you think? But also knowing you as a reader, which we do, you specifically would love this because my favorite trope is childhood friends to lovers to enemies or strangers back to lovers.
Yeah.
I think it's so hard to do that right because you have to create enough tension where it's believable that these two people would have separated, but also believable that they could find their way back.
Yeah.
And I think that I bought the book. I read it cover to cover in like 5 hours on my couch, and exactly the same. I closed it and I was like, whoa, that is something special that she put in that book. I immediately thought, yeah, she's going to be an auto-buy author for me. And I actually had the chance to meet her. I went to Barry's Bay, which is 45 minutes from where I'm from.
Yeah.
And it was so special to meet her, and also as a writer to hear her speak about her love for Canada and the permission that she received from an agent, permission, quote unquote.
Yeah. To set these
write
books
a book. Yes. Because she had heard that, you have to write a book in the US for Americans to read it. And an agent said, no, people will read a beautiful story set in Canada. And when I heard that, I actually changed the location of the book I'm writing to be in the East Coast of Canada.
But
and
I love that so much, but also like Farah, like you're a romance writer. Does hearing Alicia say that surprise you? The idea that it actually took Alicia's American followers to say, you gotta read this book by a Canadian writer in order for Alicia, who lives 45 minutes down the road, to go, yeah, I will pick up this book by a Canadian romance writer. Does that surprise you, Farah?
Actually, no, not at all. The US is so much bigger than us. They have 10 times our population. So there's obviously going to be more people on TikTok or wherever. But also, as a whole, I've found that American readers tend to be more vocal about reading books that are more like guilty pleasures, or reading books in genres that are considered to be of less value than Canadian readers. For many reasons. We can go on forever about the CanLit sphere and how it's definitely been boosting more literary books in the past than commercial or popular books. It's definitely changing. CanLit is finally celebrating romance, which is great because the readers have always been here. I'm just talking about like the people that are talking about it, the reviewers, the newspapers, the media.
I actually think that the first time Canada Reads featured a romance book as like a nominee was Carley Fortune with Meet Me at the Lake. Please correct me if I'm wrong.
That's correct. That is correct. That was this year. Yeah.
It
didn't go very far in the competition, but it certainly, but the fact that it made it to the sort of final five, 100%. Also, I think that's hearing you say that, Farah, the idea that American readers have a lot less reservation about being, interested in a guilty pleasure book makes me go, oh, and that's why Kathleen brings me the most romance books in my life, because like I don't think that phrase exists in your lexicon, Kathleen. You're like a pleasure's a pleasure. You know what I mean? Like we're not.
Absolutely.
Agreed.
Yeah. Yeah, we're not trying to apologize for the things that bring us joy.
There's no guilt about it.
Yeah, 100%. Okay, I want to come back to that actually in just a moment. But Farah, I want to talk about how one of the things that Carley's getting a lot of attention for is the thing that Alicia mentioned, the idea that these novels are set in Barry's Bay. The second one is set in Toronto, and then the third novel, which is this one, is Prince Edward Island. For a book that's received so much attention, does that surprise you? The idea that these books are sort of set in Canada. I mean, like we're talking so much attention that Prince Harry and Meghan are turning one of the books into a movie. Does it surprise you that these books that are set in Canada are getting this much attention, Farah?
If this was like 8 years ago, it would be a big shocker, but I think that it's another place where the industry has changed a lot. I know a ton of Canadian romance authors, and most of them are published by American publishers. And that goes back to my comment about CanLit and how it wasn't very embracing for romance. So most of those American publishers, up until recently, were asking the writers to write American set books. U.S. readers, there's obviously a lot more readers in the U.S. and Canada, and that readers wanted books that were familiar to them, the books and places that they'd heard of. Books were often set in New York and Chicago and LA. So the same kind of settings over and over again. That's not really as much of a thing anymore. My first romance book was published 5 years ago. I've had like 8 books since then. And not once have I ever been asked to change the setting of my books. My characters are all Canadian. Sometimes they travel, but they're all Canadian. Most of my books are set in Toronto. And I know I'm not the only one. There's lots of other Canadian romance writers that now have American publishers who are okay with us writing Canadian settings.
Farah, did you just say your first book was 5 years ago and then you wrote 8 books since then? Is that what you just told?
I also clocked that.
Is that what you just casually dropped into this conversation?
Casually. Yeah, my 7th book is coming out actually on July 2nd.
Okay.
So yes, and then I have another book coming out. I write both adult and YA romance, so I get to write more than one a year, which is great. And my publishers are amazing, and my readers are supporting me. So it's fantastic. I'm living my dream.
You're also just flexing on my productivity schedule. That's what you're doing. But that's fine. I forgive you and I will let it go. If folks are just joining us, my name is Elamin Abdul-Mahmoud, and I'm not nearly as productive as our guests. This show is called Commotion. Kathleen Newman-Bremang is here. Alicia Foshay is here. And Farah Heron is here. And we're talking about this moment the romance novels are having. Kathleen, why do you think we keep returning to romance over and over? Why do you think they're so popular right now?
Oh, I mean, I think, they've always been popular. Like, you think of top of the charts, most popular, selling out, Danielle Steele, Nora Roberts, Nicholas Sparks, Nicola Yoon, I think it's because women buy them. They're having, there's a market of buying power from this specific demographic that we know buys a lot. And then I think they're having a moment right now, getting adaptations, getting picked up for movies and TV shows, and being a bit more like in the monoculture. Like, we know the names, Emily Henry, Jenny Han, unfortunately, Colleen Hoover. I think because of that buying power, as I mentioned, but also I think people just want to see people fall in love. Like, it's that simple. It's why that really bad rom-com with Glenn Powell and Sydney Sweeney did so well. We just want to see it.
Yes.
Anyone but you. Totally. We just want to see it. And I think we're also in a time where we don't find shame anymore in the things that make us feel good. Like you mentioned the term guilty pleasure. That's not a term I am familiar with, like, ever.
Can't relate.
I also think can't relate. But I think in general, we're all looking for comfort, as the world crumbles around us. And there has been this renewed value placed on whatever it is and wherever it is that you find that comfort. I think social media, TikTok has really heightened that. And then falling in love is something that all of us hopefully will do in our lifetimes. It is universal, but it is also something that feels so specific and so unique and intimate when you're going through it. It makes you feel like you're the only person in the world having this specific feeling. And I think that we keep coming back to the genre, and they are so popular because they capture that vulnerability and how singular that feeling is. Yeah. And I also think they are just made up of really good stories and really good writing, as I mentioned, which this genre gets, people don't say that a lot about this genre.
Totally agree.
I was going to say, Alicia, I think, first of all, as Kathleen was talking there and describing just the pull of romance novels, your whole face was glowing, we should say. You were just beaming from ear to ear. What do you think it is that people get out of romance novels that they don't necessarily get out of other genres?
I'm going to piggyback on what Kathleen said, because I think she made a really good point about how there's a comfort element. And I've always said, I've said this on my pages multiple times, there's something inherently risk-free about a romance that, falling in love can scare a lot of people in real life, or, maybe these tropes aren't something that you would actually do in real life, but you can engage in a darker romance, in a more taboo romance, in a couple of things that maybe you don't get to have in your real life because you're afraid, because your family wouldn't approve, for a million different reasons. And you get to indulge in something that won't hurt you. And it's very momentary and it's very contained. And I think that makes a lot of people feel really safe. And I also think, I've been saying, women control the economy. When women say something is cool, it blows up. Taylor Swift, Starbucks, romance books, rom-com movies are back. Things that women find cool, people engage in financially. That's why all these cutesy things are coming back. Trends are mostly controlled by women. And so I think that there's a reason that romance is the top fiction genre, is that it's emotional. It brings out the best in people. It brings out opinions. It also gives women somewhere to go that is safe when the world doesn't always provide that to them. And I love romance. There's something about it that feels like magic.
There's also the idea of safety is interesting to me because, you know, the difference between a man written by a man and a man written by a woman are just sort of, you know, in terms of the universe of novels, there's just a massive wide difference. Kathleen, can I just say there are people who read romance novels who don't necessarily say that they read romance novels. Mm-hmm. And where I'm going with this is really Sally Rooney. You know, I think Sally Rooney writes very sophisticated romances that are also class commentary and that are also commentary on politics. But they're at their core, the engine of those stories, to me, is a romance. What's your take on maybe romance that is hiding in plain sight as something else?
Well, I think even that framing that is hiding is just marketing, right? Like, I think that Sally Rooney is a romance writer. And just because her books are sad and Irish and intelligent, people don't want to call them romances because people think that romances aren't smart, but they are. And all of those themes that you mentioned, there are so many books that I could list, romances that I have read that also tackle class and the economy and all these other things and race and like big, heavy topics. But there is a romance at the center of them. And so, yeah, I think it really, really bothers me actually that this genre isn't taken seriously. And I think that does have something to do with what Alicia was talking about, which is that it is, you know, the main demographic is women. But also, you know, there's romance in everything. You know, like there's a great romance subplot in Die Hard. The Mission Impossible franchise is like basically just a romance. Fast and the Furious is like Letty and Dobbs' love story, right? In action movies, in dramas, there's going to be romance in everything because it's what makes us human. You know, it is the great it is the great motivator and unifier. And I think that people should look at what they love and consume and see that you've probably been reading romance all along, baby. Like you are a romance lover. Everybody is. Yeah. And so, yeah, I don't love the like, oh, they're hiding the romance in there. It's like romance is already in everything. And it is okay to unabashedly be unashamed of your love of romance. It doesn't make you any less smart. It also, if the book is horny and has sex scenes, that's okay too. That doesn't make it any lesser or any less smart because there's sex in it. Again, it is something we all do.
Yeah, totally.
First of all, love all of that energy that you're coming forth. You're like, we got to talk about it, and we will, and we're going to do it. But also,
fired up. Sorry.
No, you did, and I'm glad. I'm glad that happened. That is a great point. Okay, we just got to take a quick break. We'll be back in just a second. Okay, we are back. Farah, I want to play your clip actually because like Carley Fortune talked about this. She was on Q speaking with Tom Power about this latest book, and they talked about romance as a genre, and they talked a little bit about what Kathleen was talking about there. She said that a lot of people nowadays are sort of unapologetic about love and romance. There's no shame, particularly for younger people. But I want you to listen to what else she had to say.
I do think that because there are so many people coming to romance, there is also a shift in you know, what the overall feeling is about romance books. I think it is improving. But I do think those prejudices still linger.
Farah, what do you think of what Carley is saying there? Is that your experience?
Yeah, I think those prejudices do still linger. In many ways, it's gotten better. I remember with my first book, we had a book club at a friend's office was reading it. And so they had a book club and it was mostly men in it. And it wasn't until after they'd all discussed the novel and talked about how they liked to talk about class and race in it and how all that. It wasn't until after that I mentioned something about romance. And one of them said, oh, was this a romance? They didn't realize that was the genre that they were reading. And I think that's the misconception is whenever somebody starts talking bad about romance, I would be like, have you read one? And their idea Gold Harlequins, the Bodice Rippers.
Sure.
And the genres change, just like Kathleen said. There's amazing books, and then there's also not so. But there are so many romance novels. It's the biggest genre, so there's so many. So to judge them all by a small portion of them is ridiculous. People also think that they're more formulaic then they're very easy to write, which they're not easy to write. But also people think they're formulaic, and that isn't. They're no more formulaic than other genre fiction.
Yeah.
I mean, the hero's journey in sci-fi, at the end of a mystery, they figure out who done it, just like in romance. At the end of a romance, the couple is together. So all of those things kind of build on top of each other to create those misconceptions. But I think it's like Alicia said, it's so amazing if an author is able to create a believable love story. Like it's in a believable emotions are really hard to put on the page. And I'm like in awe of anyone that's able to do that well, to get the reader so engrossed in it. It gives you the same feeling that you feel when you fell in love. And that's why we keep going back to it. It's addicting. So I think like, I kind of went off on a rail there, but I think that those misconceptions are changing. And I think the best way to change them is to get people to read them more.
Kathleen, we should acknowledge that like there are plenty of romance writers out there who are writing from the perspective of what they know, but not all of them are equally represented on summer readings or bestseller lists. You know, what do you think could be done to better improve representation in romance?
Oh, how much time we got? I think, like every other industry, publishing has started to roll back their diversity efforts, since a bunch of promises were made in 2020 and 2021. Those promises are now being broken. And I think one of the biggest things, like you said, the work is there. Right? Like I almost exclusively, I read romance all the time, and I read mostly Black women authors. Like they are there, they exist. And I think the problem is at the higher up, right? Like I think editors of color, there aren't a lot of them. A lot of them who were hired in 2020, 2021 have left or since been laid off after, experiencing that like glass cliff effect. And a lot of literary agents who have said that publishers don't want books that examine race and racism anymore. And then they also just lump in any book that's by someone of color as something that's examining race and racism. Yeah. So I think the problem is that it's overwhelmingly white behind the scenes. And so the people in power need to be diversified at that executive level, and then not tokenizing books with Black, brown, Indigenous protagonists.
I agree.
Like, saying we already have one, we can't promote another one, and understanding that there is a diversity of stories within communities and prioritizing that.
I got just a few minutes left here, so we are going to go, because it's officially summer readings time. I'm going to get each of you to give me a recommendation. First, let me say, Alicia, what do you want to throw in here? What is the thing that you want people to go pick that up because it's time for you to get it?
Book-wise? Or just in general? I'm thinking, what makes a good summer read? I think something that feels like you're escaping, because I think that summer, it breeds like thoughts of summer vacation. Yeah. And so I'm thinking you want something that'll maybe make you travel to either another world or somewhere else in, your own world. I obviously recommend Carley Fortune, but I also think that Abby Jimenez and Emily Henry are two of my favorite summer romance writers. Beach Read is the perfect beach read. Please bring it to the beach.
Emily Henry.
Yes. My copy is full of like sand and rippled water pages, and it's just like it's perfect. So I definitely recommend that. I think.
Farah, what about you? What do you want to recommend in here?
I have two recommendations for people that might not normally read romance.
Okay.
The first is To Have and to Heist by Sarah Desai. Sarah's a South Asian Canadian romance author, and this is a heist book, just like Ocean's 11. We've got a wacky group of people who each have their own specific skill that they're good at, and they all come together to steal a jewel from a bad guy.
Oh, I love that. I love a getting the crew together scene. That's the best.
It's fantastic.
Found family.
Yeah.
Getting the crew together. I love that. Also, Wildlife by Opal Way is another Asian Canadian author, and it is an adventure romance set in the wilderness, and there's lots of hijinks and animal encounters and bad stuff happening, and they come out of it unscathed.
Love to see it. Kathleen, we got 1 minute left. Take it away.
Oh, okay. I had something else, but you know what? I'm just going to say to read Black women romance writers, Akwaeke Emezi, Tia Williams, Kennedy Ryan, Jasmine Guillory, Talia Hibbert, Alyssa Cole. They are out here delivering the best of the genre. And yeah, they deserve your attention.
I like the way that you said it. You're like, that's also my group chat because I'm talking to these people all the time. You know what I mean? That's
You're like,
that's the energy with which you said it. You're like, these are my friends. I've spent all my time reading their work and hanging out with them. I appreciate all of you guys being here. Alicia, Kathleen, Farah, thank you so much for your time and for your energy, for your attention. Thank you.
Thank you.
Of course. Thanks for having us.
My pleasure. Kathleen Newman-Bremang is Deputy Director of Refinery 29 Unbothered. Farah Heron is a romance writer whose novels include Accidentally Engaged and The Chai Factor. Her latest novel, Just Playing House, comes out tomorrow. And Alicia Foshay is a books influencer on TikTok and Instagram. You can find her at als.bookclub. And that is it for the podcast today. Listen, I hope that you are enjoying your Canada Day. My name is Elamin Abdul Mahmoud. This show is called Commotion. And guess what? I'll meet you back here tomorrow.